They say you never really know someone until you find their secrets hidden under the bed. I learned this lesson at 73 years old, holding a faded piece of paper that shattered 40 years of my life. My name is Catherine, and this is the story of how I discovered my husband never actually married me. It started on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon in 2019. I was cleaning out the bedroom, something I'd done 1,000 times before, when my hand brushed against something wedged beneath our old mahogany bed frame. At first, I thought it was just another forgotten receipt or perhaps one of those expired coupons I was always saving. But as I pulled it out and dusted off the years of accumulated grime, my heart stopped. It was a marriage certificate. Small, yellowed with age, the ink faded but still legible. The date read July 15, 1979, the very year Thomas told me we should get married. The groom's name was Thomas Richard Bennett, my husband of 40 years. But the bride's name wasn't Catherine Ann Sullivan. It was Victoria Louise Chambers. Victoria. His dear friend, Victoria. The woman he'd known since college. The woman who was always just a friend. I sat on the edge of that bed for what felt like hours, my hands trembling as I traced the embossed seal with my fingertips. Everything suddenly made sense, every excuse, every deflection, every time I'd brought up getting our own marriage certificate and he'd brushed it off with a wave of his hand. Let me take you back to where this all began. Thomas and I met in 1978 at a community fundraiser in Boston. He was 32, a charismatic architect with dreams bigger than the buildings he designed. I was 30, working as a librarian, quiet and reserved but drawn to his confidence like a moth to flame. We fell in love quickly, or at least, I did. Within a year, he proposed, and I said yes without hesitation. But here's where the story takes its first turn. When I suggested we go to City Hall to make it official, Thomas frowned. Catherine, do we really need all that paperwork? We know we're committed to each other. That's what matters, isn't it? His voice was so sincere, his eyes so warm, that I believed him. Besides, we were planning a small ceremony with close friends anyway. What difference did a legal document make? Our twins, Nathan and Rebecca, were born in 1981. When I brought up the marriage certificate again, thinking surely now, with children, we should make everything official, Thomas became irritated for the first time. We have 2 beautiful babies, a home, a life together. Why are you so obsessed with a piece of paper? Are you saying our family isn't real without it? I dropped it. I didn't want to seem ungrateful or cause conflict. I had everything I thought I needed, a partner, children, a home filled with laughter. The years rolled by like pages in a book I couldn't stop reading. I raised Nathan and Rebecca, managed our household, supported Thomas through career changes and promotions. When the kids had children of their own, my grandchildren, Sophie and Michael, I threw myself into helping with them too. Thomas's career demanded long hours, frequent travel, and important meetings. Someone has to keep the family running, he'd say, and that someone was always me. I never questioned it. This was what wives did, wasn't it? This was what mothers did. This was love. But there were signs I ignored. Victoria was always around, at dinner parties, at family gatherings, at the kids' graduations. She's practically family, Thomas would say. Nathan and Rebecca adored her, often commenting how elegant she was, how worldly, how different from me with my simple clothes and home-cooked meals. Sometimes I'd catch Thomas looking at her with an expression I couldn't quite read, but I pushed down the uncomfortable feelings. I trusted him. Now, holding that marriage certificate, all those moments replayed in my mind like a cruel movie. Every time Victoria visited and Thomas's face lit up. Every time the kids compared me unfavorably to her. Every time I felt small and insignificant in my own home. The front door slammed, jolting me from my thoughts. Nathan's voice boomed through the house. Mom! Sophie was supposed to be picked up from school an hour ago. Victoria had to get her. What were you doing? I walked out of the bedroom, still clutching the certificate. Nathan stood in the entryway with his wife, Jennifer. Rebecca was there too, with her husband, David, and both grandchildren. They all looked at me with varying degrees of annoyance. I found something, I said quietly, holding up the paper. The room went silent. Nathan's face drained of color. Rebecca's eyes widened, then quickly looked away. Jennifer and David exchanged a knowing glance that told me everything I needed to know. You all knew, I whispered. It wasn't a question. Rebecca stepped forward, guilt written across her features. Mom, it's not what you think. Dad can explain. They're married, I interrupted, my voice surprisingly steady. Your father and Victoria are legally married. Have been since 1979. Which means for 40 years, I've been, what exactly? A live-in housekeeper? A nanny? Mom, don't be dramatic, Nathan said, but his voice lacked conviction. It doesn't change anything. You're still our mother. Dad still loves you. I looked at my children, the babies I'd carried, raised, sacrificed everything for, and saw strangers. How long have you known? Rebecca's silence was answer enough. Since we were teenagers, Nathan finally admitted. Victoria told us. She made us promise not to say anything because it would hurt you. How thoughtful of her, I said, surprised by the bitter laugh that escaped my lips. That's when Thomas arrived, summoned by Rebecca's frantic phone call. He stood in the doorway, still handsome at 75, still carrying himself with that confidence I'd once found so attractive. Now I just saw it for what it was, arrogance. Catherine, let's talk about this calmly, he began, using that reasonable tone he always employed when he wanted his way. Why? I asked simply. Why marry her and not me? He had the decency to look uncomfortable. It was complicated. Victoria's parents had old-fashioned views. They wouldn't support her unless she was married. She was sick, they thought she might not survive. She asked me to help her, and I cared about her. But then I met you, and everything changed. I wanted to be with you, but by then, getting a divorce seemed too complicated. Too expensive. Too messy. So you just lived a double life? For 40 years? I never loved her romantically, he insisted. You're the one I chose to build a life with. Doesn't that count for something? I stared at this man I'd devoted my life to and felt nothing but emptiness. Get out. Catherine, be reasonable. Get out of my house. Thomas looked around at our children, expecting them to support him, but even Nathan stayed silent. Finally, he left. The next few weeks were a blur. I consulted a lawyer who confirmed what I'd suspected. Without a marriage certificate, I had no legal claim to anything Thomas owned. But here's what Thomas didn't know, what nobody knew. My parents had passed away 15 years earlier, leaving me their entire estate. I'd kept it in my name, thinking someday I'd will it to Nathan and Rebecca. Those properties, that investment portfolio, it was all mine. I'd lived modestly, never touching it, because I thought we were building our future together. Now I realized I'd been building a future alone all along. I moved into one of my properties across town, a beautiful brownstone I'd been renting out. For the first time in 40 years, I woke up to silence. No one needed breakfast. No one needed rides. No one needed anything from me. It was terrifying. And then, slowly, it became liberating. I started taking art classes I'd always dreamed about. I joined a book club. I traveled to Italy, something I'd wanted to do since I was young but never could because the family needed me. I discovered that at 73, I was still capable of joy, of growth, of becoming someone new. 6 months after I left, Nathan and Rebecca came to visit. Thomas and Victoria had moved in together officially, and apparently, it was a disaster. Victoria, used to her independent lifestyle, hated domestic responsibilities. Thomas, used to having me manage everything, expected to be waited on. They fought constantly. The house was chaotic. Nathan and Rebecca, who'd been helping Thomas cope with my absence, were exhausted and resentful. "We're sorry, Mom," Rebecca said, tears streaming down her face. "We were wrong. About everything." I looked at my daughter and saw genuine remorse. "I appreciate that. I do. But sorry doesn't give me back 40 years. What can we do?" Nathan asked desperately. "How do we fix this?" "You can't," I said gently. "But you can learn from it. You can teach Sophie and Michael to value honesty, to respect themselves, to never let anyone make them feel small. You can be better than we were." Over the next year, I rebuilt my relationship with my children. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick, but slowly, we found our way back to each other. They saw me differently now, not just as Mom, the woman who existed to serve them, but as Catherine, a person with dreams and worth beyond my utility. Thomas reached out several times, especially after his relationship with Victoria crumbled. He wanted to reconcile, claimed he'd made a terrible mistake, promised things would be different. But I'd already learned the most important lesson of my life: I didn't need him to complete me. I never had. Last month, I was featured in the local paper for a charity art show. The article described me as a late-blooming artist whose work captures the resilience of the human spirit. Thomas sent me a copy with a note: "I'm proud of you. I always knew you were special." I recycled it without response. Because here's what I finally understand: his pride, his approval, his validation, none of it matters. What matters is that I'm proud of myself. After 73 years of living for others, I'm finally living for me. I'm not saying my story has a fairy tale ending. I lost decades of my life to a lie. My relationship with my children was damaged in ways that may never fully heal. I'll never get back the time I wasted waiting for Thomas to choose me when he'd already chosen someone else. But I got something better than a fairy tale. I got the truth. And with that truth came freedom. These days, I wake up in my sun-filled brownstone, make coffee just the way I like it, and decide how I want to spend my day. Sometimes I paint. Sometimes I read. Sometimes I just sit and enjoy the silence, marveling at how peaceful life can be when you're not constantly trying to earn love from people who should have given it freely. If you're watching this and something in my story resonates, I need you to know, it's never too late to choose yourself. It's never too late to demand the respect and honesty you deserve. And it's never too late to start living the life you've always wanted. So here's my question for all of you watching: where are you watching from, and what would you do in my situation? Drop a comment below. I read every single one, and your perspectives matter to me. If this story touched you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We share real stories from real people because sometimes knowing you're not alone makes all the difference. And if you have your own story you'd like to share, whether it's about betrayal, redemption, finding yourself later in life, or anything in between, leave it in the comments or reach out to us. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Together, we're building a community of people who refuse to settle for less than they deserve. Remember, you are worthy. You are enough. And you are never too old to start over. Until next time, this is Catherine, reminding you to choose yourself. Always.